Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, the United Nations Security Council has condemned the ongoing violence from Sudan to the Middle East, urging a cessation of hostilities. China will launch its Shenzhou 19 manned space mission on Wednesday morning. And Volkswagen has announced plans to shut down at least 3 factories in Germany. We begin with the Middle East. China's ambassador to the United Nations is urging Israel to stop all provocations and called on all sides to exercise restraint. Fu Cong expressed concern for the rising tension in the Middle East as the UN Security Council met to discuss the new round of hostilities between Iran and Israel.
Any reckless provocation or military adventure to expand the fighting is irresponsible and is highly likely to lead to miscalculation and disastrous consequences. It must be pointed out that the fundamental reason for the continued worsening of tensions in the Middle East is that the ceasefire in Gaza has remained elusive. The fact that a number of Council resolutions calling for a ceasefire have been shelved undermines the Council's own authority and is not conducive to a fundamental solution to the conflict.
An Iranian envoy told the Security Council that Tehran reserves the right to respond to Israel's aggression. Israel's UN ambassador warned that any further Iranian military action would be met with swift and decisive consequences. Security Council members also discussed the hostilities in Sudan. Jody Jacobs reports from the United Nations in New York.
It was a busy day for the UN Security Council as it met publicly and privately to discuss ongoing conflicts around the world. Council members have condemned the continued violence across Sudan, stressing the need for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying the conflict there has resulted in a catastrophic humanitarian crisis that has had a destabilizing effect on the region. Since April last year, Sudan has been in the midst of a deadly war, torn between the government Sudanese armed forces and the rival paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. The conflict has displaced more than 10 million people, creating one of the worst global humanitarian crises.
Sudan is once again rapidly becoming a nightmare of mass ethnic violence, in particular with the dramatic escalation of fighting in Al-Fasher. We have consistently appealed to both sides to end the fighting and come to the negotiating table. But instead of lowering tensions, they are escalating military action.
Meanwhile, an emergency session of the Council was also convened following the airstrikes that Israel launched against Iran. Tehran, supported by Algeria, China and Russia, requested the urgent meeting. The airstrikes marked the latest escalation in the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. Iran has condemned the attack as a blatant violation of international law and has vowed to retaliate, while Israel insists that it has a right to defend itself if Iran continues its attacks against it and its civilians. The rising tensions a concern for a divided UN Security Council. But as the hostilities continue to simmer in the Middle East with no end in sight, the United Nations is once again calling for de-escalation. It says the Council needs to shoulder its responsibility and demand an end to the fighting and must act to restore international peace and security.
That was Jody Jacobs at the UN headquarters. In Asia, China is targeting early Wednesday morning to launch its Shenzhou 19th manned space mission. Commander Cai Shuzhe and young crew members Song Lingdong and Wang Haoze will take over from the Shenzhou 18 crew inside the Tiangong space station. 48-year-old Cai was a member of the Shenzhou 14 mission 2 years ago. He said they will perform several spacewalks.
The
Shenzhou 19 mission includes multiple extravehicular activities. We're fully trained on the ground. We've considered all the possible scenarios. For example, we've learned from the previous missions and we've made all kinds of plans. I believe that with solid training and support from the ground, we will be able to face the challenges and we can accomplish our tasks smoothly and successfully.
For more on Shenzhou 19's tasks and China's future missions to the moon, Zhao Yang spoke with the China National Space Administration's former Director for International Cooperation, Xu Yansong.
Another exciting launch about to happen, and as always, the crew is tasked with a multitude of experiments. What stands out for you this time?
Well, I think the crew, as we have seen, that these are new generations after 1990s as their birthdays. So I think these are exciting moments that we have new generations of astronauts on board the space station. One of the most prominent experiment I see with the crew in preparation is the installation of a debris shield for the space station. We know that those living quarters and life support systems are critical and needs to be protected. And with the increasing activities in outer space, we see a number of debris that is increasing in terms of this orbit and other orbits. So the protection shield that's going to be installed on the station is essential for the protection of astronauts and the experiments and the station itself.
Mr. Xu, so looking a little bit more farther ahead, China does plan to launch a manned mission to the moon before 2030, and it's already conducting ground tests. What else does the China Manned Space Agency need to do to meet this goal?
Well, we know that lunar landing is a complex system that involves a number of subsystem, as we call it. The Long March 10 is one of them. The Mengzhou is one of the capsule that needs to be used for the lunar missions, and the Lanyue is one of the landing properties that needs to be landed on the surface of the moon. And also we have a rover in place, and also spacesuit that needs to be demonstrated. We heard that these engineering models, what we call it engineering models, because these are firstly made prototypes that needs to be manufactured and demonstrated and validated before they put into production and for a flight model. And also we have a ground support system, not only for communication, but also for control of the spacecraft. All of these has to work together. It's an integrated complex system that we involve many aspects that needs to work together, like connecting dots into a trajectory that has no hiccups. So this is very challenging for the space community in China.
That was former Space Administration official Xu Yansong on China's space exploration program. The leader of Japan's Democratic Party for the People has declared that he will not join a coalition led by the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Yuichiro Tamaki was speaking after the LDP suffered a significant loss of seats in recent parliamentary election, falling short of a majority for the first time in 15 years. Rebecca Bondon has the details from Tokyo.
Well, this is still a period of significant political uncertainty following Sunday's general election, and that result that the LDP coalition had lost its majority. And now the LDP is scrambling to try to find support from other parties. Now, that's because within the next few weeks, Parliament will have to convene to actually appoint a Prime Minister. And with the ruling party losing its majority, it does now need support of other parties, whether that's in a minority government or in a coalition, although the Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, has said that at the moment they're not looking at a coalition, but we'll have to see what that actually sort of looks like going forwards, given this situation. Ishiba has also said that he doesn't plan to step down, although this was a decision that backfired when it came to calling that snap election, which resulted in this result that was not favourable to the party. And this is a party that's dominated Japanese politics for most of the past 7 decades, and for more than a decade the LDP has enjoyed a majority in its own right in the lower house of Parliament. Now, all that has changed, and that's because of issues including a political fundraising scandal and other scandals that the party has been dealing with, and also the economic situation in the country, including the high cost of living.
That was Rebecca Bondon reporting on the Japan election. In Europe, carmaker Volkswagen has announced plans to shut down at least 3 factories in Germany, lay off tens of thousands of employees, and shrink its remaining plants. The closures would mark the first in the company's 87-year history. The group states that it requires a radical overhaul to address increasing competition in China and slowing sales in other markets. Trent Murray has more from Berlin.
Olaf Scholz has been briefed on these discussions taking place at VW. His spokesperson said in a statement that the Chancellor's position has always been clear and that job losses are something that he wants to avoid and he wants to try and secure as many jobs as possible. But this undoubtedly will pile a lot of pressure on him. Already the polls are showing that a vast majority of Germans just don't believe him and his coalition government have been running the economy effectively. One would imagine this news will pile even more pressure onto that narrative, and it really does, of course, come as he's facing an uphill battle already for a re-election bid. He's got an election in less than 12 months' time now. We know the economy will be right at the heart of that discussion, and this news from Volkswagen as well as Mercedes-Benz and Porsche, it should be said, who have also announced their own cost cutting in recent weeks, really does, as I say, raise many questions about whether German auto industry more broadly can compete, particularly with some of those Chinese brands and also brands out of Asia more broadly, which CEOs here are saying are continuing to gain market share and really causing a lot of difficulty for the bottom line for those big or three or four big German auto brands.
That was Trent Murray in Berlin. Finally, in North America, the annual U.S. International Forum of Agricultural Robotics has begun in California. The event highlights the latest innovations in agricultural automation and has become the largest agri-tech conference of its kind in North America. It showcases advanced technologies designed to address labor shortages and improve sustainability. Mark New reports.
At the International Forum of Agricultural Robotics, the Ukrainian startup Beatless unveils a device that uses natural scents to attract and kill invasive insects.
To do it more naturally, to avoid pesticides and harmful chemicals that are harmful both to human health.
The Xi'an China-based company MQ is introducing an autonomous pesticide spraying robot.
Some vineyard or orchard is very narrow, so this machine can suit for many different kind of vineyard or orchard.
The process of lettuce thinning traditionally is done with this amount of manpower, but Indian company Nika Robotics believes all that's needed is their computer vision-driven device.
It's able to move at a relatively high speed, and it's able to identify what's a lettuce, what's a weed, and not only that, figure out which lettuce do you keep and which lettuce do you kill.
With gadgetry on display that at times look like something out of a sci-fi movie, we sought the opinion of farmer Craig Rogers from Indiana, who diligently inspects an AI-driven crop sprayer.
They're pushing more and more AI. It's going to help every farmer out there. The biggest part of it that we're going to have to get over the hurdle, especially for the Midwest guy, is the trust that a computer can see better than me driving.
Automation is also arriving at orchards. Advanced Farm gives us a first look at their prototype robot picker.
Our machine picked 43,000 apples in a 24-hour period with 6 robotic arms. That's 7,000-ish successful picks per robotic arm in the course of a day, and I'm not sure that there's any tech in any sector in the entire world that's doing that with robotic arms. And the secret there is that we're using a stereo camera on the end effector. We're taking about 30 frames per second to understand where the apple is and to change our path to the apple in an optimal way.
When asked how this could impact jobs, Cobb merely says the ag industry needs help now.
Everywhere in the world, growers are really struggling with labor. And if you look at any specialty crop category, about 50% or more of the cost structure is represented by harvest labor costs.
Advanced Farm says the robot picker isn't perfect. Still too many apples missed and dropped. But it's adapting and learning every day how to better imitate the human touch.
That was Mark New reporting from California. Now recapping the headlines, the United Nations Security Council has condemned the violence from Sudan to the Middle East, urging a cessation of hostilities. China will launch its Shenzhou 19 manned space mission on Wednesday morning. And a German carmaker Volkswagen has announced plans to shut down at least 3 factories in the country, the first in the company's 87-year history. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.